Hey, hockey fans, welcome to the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. I've spent over 4 decades working the game, fortunate enough to meet some of the great legends of the game, saw them come into the league, watched them shine in the game, and now they've moved on to life after the game. The 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast gives us a chance to catch up, tell some great stories, relive some great memories, and to hear what they're up to today. Today, one of the most highly anticipated players ever to come out of Canadian junior hockey, 6 foot, 200-pound center, with ridiculous speed and stick handling skills, 45 goals, a staggering 137 points in his last year junior, and that was in just 53 games. The Sens took him first overall in 1993, but the transition was a struggle. Things never worked out at the NHL level, and at the age of 25, he walked away temporarily. After 2 years away, he made a comeback as a completely different player. Now at 48, he's just recently released a documentary on Amazon chronicling his incredible journey. We're pleased to welcome Alexander Daigle. Alexander, it is so great to see you, and you look good. How are you doing?
Thank you. No, doing great. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
The documentary, and I got to be honest, I didn't know this was coming out, and I really want to ask you why this was important to you. It's called The Chosen One, Alexander Daigle, a story of unattainable expectations, bitter disappointments, and later a measure of redemption. That's the way you guys describe this. Why was that an important story for you to tell?
Well, first of all, the NHL reached out about a year and a half ago and said that they pitched to Amazon a couple of ideas about ex-NHL player stories and everything, and Amazon was really keen on my story. And from that standpoint, I was like, okay, might as well be part of it. So I might as well tell my story. So that was one of the reasons. The other reason is it's a bit, I tell people that is like, my kids, they never saw me play. They have no clue who I am. I'm the guy, I had a minivan at one point. Now I have a SUV. I'm going to practice and everything, but they have no clue that I play that long and I play. And that was that magnitude, Canadian junior, everything. So for me, telling that side was awesome. And my dad was at the end of his life, had brain cancer when we started in that process. And so we got him at the right time. He was still in good shape. And for my kids, for myself, seeing him on tape was awesome. So it was good times.
And now that it's done, now that it's in the candidates out there, how do you feel about the way your story has been told?
I was kind of scared a little bit because I saw the longer version, which was an hour 15, and there was a lot of things that I was a little bit uncomfortable. And it was an uncomfortable process because you talk about things 30 years ago that didn't go really my way at that time. like the first 5 minutes went great, and after that, there was different issues. But I watched it 2 days ago with my kids, and they were all excited. And I was crying seeing, my dad where I was. And it was very emotional, but for them, I was the coolest guy. So I came back on top only for that reason. I was very, very happy. And, I watched it and, I said to myself, hey, you know what? A lot of those decisions early in my career were made at 17, 18 years old. So I was like, got to give kids breaks. It's not that easy to go through, that process, the NHL. And just to put that in perspective, I was in high school the year before, and now I'm traveling across America with money in my pocket and with a great smile, having fun. But I'm still that young kid that doesn't know English, doesn't know a lot of things about life. And so I give myself a break when I watched it.
I'm so glad, Alexander, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's exactly what I want to talk about. I mean,
yeah.
Sadly, I've been in broadcasting even longer, way before you even got drafted.
You still look great. I got to admit, I was surprised. I didn't know what to expect here.
I love the fact that you're lying through your teeth, but I'm okay with that. Feel free to do that. That's okay. You alluded to this, and I want to follow up on it. Nobody guided you back then. I mean, not only were you a young guy, there's still young guys coming to the NHL today. But Alexander, it's completely different. It's completely different. Guys go through training programs of what you can say, what you can't say, with media training, and there's PR guys standing right beside the young kids. So as soon as he starts, they say something wrong, they grab him and stop the cameras. And we in the media go, wait a minute, let the kid say what he wants to say. But no one was there. Today, they're guiding them and coddling them in a very real way. But nobody was there for you in that time, Alexander.
No, but nobody had the experience to do it. I think
Yeah.
I had a good agent. I got to admit, obviously for the contract he gave, he negotiated, but it was Pierre Lacroix. The first year when I was a pro, he went to the Nordiques. So that was a big loss. But as far as media training, that was non-existent at that time. And I think now, if you look 30 years later, you see the teams getting more involved as well because you're going to give not just give money, but you're going to draft somebody in the top five. You think he's going to be there for 15 years. Might as well protect that investment in a sense. You got to put PR teams, you got to put psychologists. Sports psychologists became a very trendy thing, but it's been around for a while in other sports, like in tennis, they have that team around them. Well, yeah, sports psychology is the setting goals, making sure that everything is up here upright. And, I think Wayne said that many times, like everything is like 90% in your head. But it's true, you got to be very healthy here and make sure that there's no distraction and make sure that you're well guided because, man, you're 18 years old, you're going to the States, brand new team. What? You're going to have your first apartment, you're going to be by yourself playing video game? No, it can't be that way. You need to be surrounded. And obviously 30 years ago was a different era and it was not the case for me.
Yeah, and listen, you mentioned it, and this is really worth stressing. You were a kid just fresh out of high school. I think, man,
Yeah.
if there were cameras rolling and people writing down everything I said at that point, I would have been in serious trouble myself. And one of the lines that infamously that you said was looking at the draft about, wanting to be number one and why that was important to you. Do you mind sharing back the story of what you said then?
Oh,
And how,
yeah, absolutely. No, I said that nobody remembers number two, but I was saying more into the moment that day. I was
right.
not saying on a career. I mean, I was, when you're a kid, you're thinking, tomorrow, what's next? Well, okay, tomorrow I'm going to training camp, but today, and there's always that race. I always say that there's always a race in Montreal, the F1, and we remember who wins that race. Nobody remembers the second next year. It was very matter of fact for me, and I'm an super easygoing guy. And first time I get drafted, first time I'm part of the NHL, that's the first line that was attached to me. And 30 years later, people still talk about it, which is, it is what it is. But media, you need to understand it quickly. And now you have that, like you said, they have coaches and they have those PR. And I think they're going to protect a lot of those kids from those lines.
And then of course what made it really difficult was the guy who did go second overall was Chris Pronger, and well, we all remember what Chris Pronger did, and that made it.
Yeah, and that was another thing when I was, I went to the World Junior with Chris, right? And we won the World Junior. It was in Sweden, and everybody knew he was the better player, and he should have been. He was 6'6". I don't know if everybody remembers, but 6'6", mean, super defensive. I think in Peterborough it was like plus 90 or something. It was like an amazing. And at 17, he was controlling the power play at the World Junior. It's pretty impressive. And I was playing on the fourth line at the World Junior. Just to put you ahead, he was, and obviously he had a great career, which is good for him.
Yeah. I got to ask you about the card show. You did a card show going to your rookie season, and you ended up in that nurse's outfit. How did that happen? Like what went behind that, and what were the ramifications, the fallout of that? Tell our audience about that experience.
Yeah, I was 17. It was before, well, maybe I was 18. It was just before the draft. I didn't have my contract yet. I was, it was in between, and that was a commercial of where Alex will go. Will he go to San Jose, Ottawa, whatever? And so they put me in different, I think it was like a firefighter. They had different type of work jobs, and where is it going to end up? And one of them was a nurse uniform. So for me, I'm at that photo shoot by myself. Like, they gave me $100,000. I remember a score gave me $100,000. So it's a lot of money. I had no money. You come from junior, you have zero. Obviously, you make $100 a week. So that was a big check. I said, yeah, man, I'll do it. So I'm going there. There's no PR. There's no, you're not proofing the pictures. It was done. And it came out about the same time as the draft. Obviously, that was the thing, right? And to this day, people still talk about it, and that's what I told in the doc is like, you set up a kid with 3 or 4 of those things, like no media training. So that quote from Chris, and you have the nurse uniform. After that, we signed another deal with a company called Jofa at the time. Obviously, you know Jofa. And Mario had that helmet. I had the helmet, and Vincent Blampus had the helmet, the ugliest helmet ever. So before I started in the league, and I put 91 on my back, which I had junior, but they gave me that because I was first overall in junior as well. But they one of the guys had number 8. But anyway, I kept it. But you put all those things. But at that time, 30 years ago, you had Mario at 66, Wayne at 99, and you had Paul Coffey at 77, and you had Eric at 88. That was it, right? And you put all those 4 or 5 things, and you tried just to make into the league 30 years ago. There was no Facebook, no Instagram, and there was none of that. You had to make your way into a men's league. You're 18, and you come out swinging like this. It was a bad combination.
Gotta tell you, man, I am so appreciative. No, but I'm so appreciative of how honest you are about this, because you really got thrown into the wolves at that point without any protection. I mean, in fairness, it wasn't like people were neglecting you. We just didn't understand.
No.
We didn't understand the impact that could happen on a young guy like you at that point.
It took me years to really put all those pieces together and said, okay, you know what? Because me, I arrive in there, and another layer that people forget: Ottawa was a brand new team in Canada, and it's speaking French and English, which is, that was one of the reasons that I was first overall, because of the location. It was a no-brainer for them. And so doing all those interviewing back and forth, I was the only guy in front, and I loved it at the beginning because, you're young and you get all this attention. But when you win 8 games a year or 10, those interviews are not very positive every day. So, it dawns on you. But, at the end of the day, it was a great ride. I was very fortunate. It shaped my life and shaped who I became. So nothing to say. It's just, I don't want to sound negative and not appreciative. It's just the way it was, and that's the way I lived it. And hey, it is what it is.
I got to tell you, though, you're not coming across sounding negative or unappreciative at all. You're not at all. Like, you're basically just saying this is the way it unfolded. And I got to tell you, you're a class guy to be able to step back now years after the fact and say, I want to tell my story. Good for you on that. And just to point out, when you went through this, everybody stood back and said, we need to make changes because this is not fair. And one of the big changes was the draft lottery, because everybody knew the Sens were tanking because they wanted to get you first overall, which understandable for the organization, but then that puts a ridiculous amount of pressure on you. You also talked about your contract. You signed the biggest contract in NHL history at that point, over $12 million as a rookie. Since then, you can't tank anymore because they have the draft lottery. And now we've got the rookie salary cap. So the guys can't come in and have these enormous, ridiculous, overstated expectations. So they changed that rule. So they changed the draft lottery. They changed the rookie salary cap. Do you ever wonder to yourself, how much better off could I have been had these rules been in place before I came in, so that I could have been protected by them as well?
Financially, no.
Yeah.
But just to frame people as well, I got drafted in '93. Lindros, Eric was drafted, I think, in '91. He signed 5 US. I signed 2.5 Canadian. But the lockout happened, and that was '94. And I think 89 or 90, they released all salaries around the league, right? So that was a big thing. So all those things,
huge.
Yeah. So for sure, the owners and the negotiation, they attacked the rookies right away because that's an easy gain, and it was a no-brainer. It made sense as well, and I think it's only fair. To your question, I think yes, because I think those contracts now, they're heavily incentivized. So you scored 20, I scored 20, and I scored 50 points, and I'm like, I would have made probably the same type of money, if you look at the way they construct those contracts. but it would have been less of a stress and less of another distraction. 100%.
Yeah. People talked about the money and how it kind of affected you. Maybe it affected you too dramatically. Like you sign as a kid, all of a sudden, all this money's coming in. But I thought it was very interesting when you tell the story about how you spent the money on your mom when you started getting
Yeah.
those. Tell us about that.
Well, I came from a very, I wouldn't say poor. I was, we played hockey and that was fine. But, money was tight. So the first thing I did, I bought my parents their houses. I got pay off the mortgage. So that was one of the first thing. And my mom was taking the bus to work. So I bought a car. And yeah, so that was the first thing I did. And after that, I bought myself a car. It was a Nissan 300ZX. I wanted to buy a Porsche or Ferrari. And my agent said, Alex, I'll give you one advice. Don't do it. First of all, what are you going to buy after? That was one thing. And second, I don't think people will look you the right way. And I said, okay. So I didn't buy that.
Now, we should point out, like, while we say you didn't hit the kind of lofty goals that there were expectations because of what you had done in major junior, that's true. Your first, your start with the Sens, you were doing okay. First couple of months, you and Alexei Yashin combined for 27 goals between the two of you, which was more than the rest of the team combined. So it really wasn't an awful start. Was it just because it was such a big gap between what people were hoping for? Was that just unrealistic?
100% unrealistic. It's 100% true. I want to go back a little bit on the draft. With the new teams. How do you call that?
The draft lottery, or
not the draft lottery, but when you get a new team, everybody
expansion
can
draft.
protect. Yes, expansion draft. So at that time, the rules were different. You project 12 players, 6D and 2 defensemen. So pretty much the players we had were American League guys. So you play every night. So that means when you're Yashin or myself, you're going to play on the first line or first power play. Yeah, great. But you're going to play against Lidstrom every night, against Pronger every night, against Lindros every night, against Eisenman every night. You're not going to play much in the offensive zone. So it's not that easy. That's why I think when you have a kid and you bring him up, you need some type of understanding that the expectations are really high, but it's not. Yes, you're going to have the Crosby, you're going to have the McDavid, but that's one every 10 years, right? In reality, if you look at all the first draft picks, they don't do that well in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? So this is one of the reasons. And for me, arriving in the league that was, it was a tougher league in a sense that, still had they changed the red line in 2004 thing. That made a big difference. The trap was in place. It was a really rough league to play in, and to be the first line, very tough.
Yeah, and to be a young team, like your point is very accurate. To be a young team coming to the league, you don't have the depth. So every night you're facing the top checkers on the other side. So now you're facing the top checkers who are 5, 6, 7 years older than you, NHL veterans, and you're a kid just coming in. It's kind of put you in a really difficult spot.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's tough to understand if you never played, but I'm trying to explain a little bit more. Yeah. But it's, you're 6 foot, 180, no muscle on, you're still 18. That's why those guys, I think they have an edge when they go university and have a little less stress of going to the pros. And the teams are happy because they're in the gym more than on the ice. Well, they're on the ice, but they play less games. And, they arrive and they're 21, 22 and they're men. So it makes a huge difference.
I want to touch on something that I had not heard before. And you and I have known each other for a very long time, and obviously I followed your entire career. But you were quoted as saying there were times in the early going there where after a game you felt you were totally in burnout mode. That out of the blue, there were times where you would find yourself after the game just being completely emotional and crying and wondering why, to the point you feel comfortable. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was more in the junior, I would say my first season. I remember because it was my birthday and my mom and came to the game and everything was in Tree River. And I told her, I said, I don't feel right. I don't have the fun I used to have. I said, I think I need a break. And my mom right away, she knew it was, need some psychology support, right? But at the time, it was 32 years ago. Obviously my agent didn't want me to be braided, just as soft or as, that was a different time. So yeah, it was for me, the biggest thing was to reset goals. And I try to explain as clearly as I could is when you're playing Atom, your goal is to go Pee-wee. When you go Pee-wee, your goal is to go Bantam. And that's the only thing you think about. And after you go midget, and after I go junior. And for me, going to the NHL was never my main goal. It was always junior. And, it changed obviously with time, but because I played in Laval, I lived in Laval, and Mario Lemieux, that's the only, I never seen the Montreal Canadian live. It was always, Mario and the Titans and everything, the Boisé. And for me, that was my idol, for obvious reasons. And when I arrived in the NHL, I wanted to prove I could play, but I couldn't never reset my goals, and I never had the help that to change that, to think that, that frame of, because I still play hockey, I still coach hockey, I love hockey, I watch hockey, but to have that little burning desire and angle to really be the best and to be on your top in the NHL, you need that edge. And if you lose that edge, you're gonna have a tough time. So for me, if I had to redo everything, I will get the resources right away to help me battle through that. There you go.
I want to talk about that, man. I got to tell you, Alexander, it's so impressive to hear you talk like this and this openly, because I look at you're 1,000% right. 30 years ago, when you were going through this, we didn't have the NHLPA assistance program that we do now. We just saw Patrick Laine step forward and saying, "I need to get away from the game. I need to get away from the game because I can't do what I want to do. I can't think clearly." And we've seen a host of players every year, 5 or 6 players who are publicly coming out and saying, "I need to get away. I need help." And if there's that many publicly going out and saying that, how many more are privately getting help? How many one-on-one are not getting to the point where Laine did, where you got to step away from the game, but actually just incorporating, working with the psychologist on a daily basis, that there's that help, that people don't have to get to that point. What's your feeling when you look back on and going, man, if only this had been there for me 30 years ago?
What type of career could I have?
Well, not even about a career, but what could it have meant to you personally to have that kind of support?
Well, I wouldn't stop 2 years in the middle of my career. That's for sure. That was on the big component. I didn't feel like it could function that well. It was not fun for me. So that would have been a different path. But at the same time, made me fight and look at other. I don't know. It made me who I am now today, and very open. And you say I'm open, but I've got nothing to guard, right? Like for me, it doesn't. It is what it is, and I'm like, if I can help anybody, if it makes sense to somebody, great. But as far as could it change something? I don't know. It's a good question that I don't have the answer, and even if I rack my brain around it, they're not going to offer me a contract at 48. So, so in a sense, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to dwell too much into it, but I'm trying to tell my story the way I lived it, and it is what it is.
I want to get back to your departure from the game entirely. Something that's important for our audience to know is when you were just 25 years old, you just said enough, and you didn't just step away from the NHL. You stepped away from the game. It's not like you went to Europe to play in that term. You completely stepped away from the game. Walk us through how you finally came to making that decision and thinking, I just can't do this right now.
I was with the Rangers at the time. I knew, my contract was over. I wasn't well mentally. I didn't have fun. It was like just a chore to practice, play hockey. That's not fun. And I always live my life in that way. I like to have fun. I like to laugh, and it's the way my dad was. That's the way I am, and so that's the first thing. So I didn't have fun. So for me, it was like a no-brainer. I didn't have any commitment, and I told Pat. Pat Brisson was my agent at the time. I said, "Listen, I'm just going to take a break," and that was it. That was that simple. I think the toughest thing for me was to tell my parents, especially my dad, because my dad always been my supporter extraordinaire and super happy. I told my friends, I said, he never told me I played bad. He always looked at all the bright plays I made into the game, because you play a game, you're not going to make 100% bad plays, but the bad plays you do, and they're going to be on TV. So, and for him, I don't know if he shut down the TV, but it was always positive. And he never coaches, he never played hockey. It was just being my dad, and just telling him was super tough. And because got to put that in perspective, 25 years ago, you go to work, and even today, if you're Canadian, you talk about hockey on your breaks, or you talk about the game yesterday, the Montreal, and now if your son is in the NHL, you talk about, hey, how was your... And now my dad would go back to work, and he's got to tell his buddies, it's over. Because in a sense, it was over. I was not coming back. And it was a tough time for him. So we talked about that before, and obviously at the end of his life, we talked about it, and it was fine. But it was a tough moment for me. That was the toughest, telling him.
Then you kind of, I'm assuming that was a window then for you to take care of yourself mentally, and you said you had some battles with depression. What did you go through in that window? I mean, I'm sure your dad was there to support you, but what did you do in that 2-year gap?
I didn't have a depression. It was very a burnout of, I was never, for me, what I did is I travel. I never really traveled in my life. I traveled outside the US, and that was a good remedy for me.
Yep.
After that, I come back to LA. I was living in LA at the time because, for obvious reason, I think Montreal and Canada, it would have been very intense, and the weather's not that great during the winter. So I stayed there, and Pat called me, and he had a league. So I started playing that league at the beginning of the season, and the NHL All-Star game was in LA at that time, and Daze was there, and Thibault, two guys I grew up with.
Yeah.
Same age. We played, forever together, and that's how I started. Geez, I still got a little run. I was 20. I just turned 27. I said, so I told Pat in June or something like that. I said, Pat, I want to come back. And what he did a great thing. He said, okay, perfect. He said, let me call Chelios. Mm-hmm. And because TR Goodman was a trainer over there. I don't know if they're still doing it that way, but it was a gold gym, and all the players that were living in LA, I'll go there in the morning. And he said, ask Chelly if you want, if you can train with him. And Chelly was so gracious. Yeah, sure. Fuck, bring Daigle in. It'll be awesome. And but I didn't know it was like 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. I was like, geez, seriously, man? Can you regroup? I didn't know those fine prints. So, but I showed up every day all summer, and and after that, Mario was making a comeback as well from injuries and whatnot. And he said, yeah, come in Pittsburgh. So I went for a pro tryout, and I made the team.
Which was awesome. How cool was it that you had Mario Lemieux, your boyhood idol, calling you back to the game?
That was awesome. And Mario, we had Bergevin as well in there. For people who don't know Marc Bergevin, the time that I played to today, I didn't hear anybody, funnier than this guy. Like, it's next level funny, right? I'm sure you know him. So it was just a great match, the three of us. And it was just almost surreal, because for me, step back 15 years ago, Mario was playing, was 10 years old. He was, the superstar that he was, but he was the superstar of Major Junior, right? 280 points, something like that. It was like crazy. And I was listening. That was my first introduction. And having him beside me, pouring my wine and my cocktails and almost shaking my martinis. It was just great.
What was great was, and I was so thrilled for you, your 03-04 season in Minnesota. Tell our audience about that and what that meant to you.
Well, I finished the season in Pittsburgh, in Wilkes-Barre. They sent me to the minors. So I was looking, I wanted to still play. So Jacques Lemaire reached out, and I went on a pro tryout again. I'm the king of the pro tryout, and I made the team. And it was great because people maybe don't know this. 20 years ago, Jacques was like he had that tough look. It was like the Devils. They were like super defensive, the trap, and he was he was old school. So I met the guy, and he was not old school at all. Like he was super nice, very shy, and it's the coach that I'm telling my buddies that there's different coaches, right? There's coaches that will scare you. There's coaches that will ignore you. There's different type of style. But Jacques, it's not. He's a shy person, and he will bring. I had one meeting with him. So you go, and he tells you the system, and he tells you how you fit in the system and how you should play. If you play it that way, well, I won't talk to you all year. If you don't, well, the first time you don't do it, maybe a period on the bench. The second time, maybe a second period. And third time, you're going to eat some popcorn upstairs. So you make your own decision, buddy. So for me, it was a revelation. It was so clear. And I played the way he wanted to play, and I had my best season by far in the NHL.
And I really appreciate the time you've taken with me this morning. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do want to say this. I get the sense now, Alexander, that through all the stuff you've gone, you're not a bitter guy, but you're actually at peace when you kind of sit back and look back on all you've accomplished. And you were talking about your kids. Your kids got to see what daddy was able to do. Am I reading that right? Are you a guy right now at 48 years old who's had an opportunity to tell a story and you're at peace with it all? Explain this to me.
Well, I got to admit that process, because I never look back. I'm that type of guy. We go forward. I don't look back. And it took me, a year and a half for doing that project with the NHL and Amazon. It was like looking back at all the good, the bad, and everything, and analyzing why, what happened there, and to be truthful, to myself. Okay, how did I act? Okay, was I right? Was I wrong? And that's it. It was just analyzing. I took the time to analyze, and being bitter, like all the decisions that were, of course, there was some decision I was maybe not having the best support system. Yeah, I get that, but a lot of decisions were my decisions. And when you got a brain of 18, 19, 20 with no experience, you still think it's the best decision you're making. Like everybody does that in life, right? But in retrospect, you look at this, and when I look at the final product with my kids, I was like, I give myself a break. Like seriously, I was 18. That was what it was. That was the situation, and probably people would have made a better career, maybe, but we'll never know. And that's my life, and why being bitter? I'm 48 and I still got a long way to go. So it's all good. And we made the top 10 on Amazon Prime. So now my kids, I'm the coolest dude ever.
You're the coolest dad ever with your kids, and nothing else matters, my friend.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy for you, man. I'm so happy for you that you got to tell your story in your own words. And wow, it's been great visiting with you, Alexander. It's been great. Do me a favor. I like to do 5 fast facts with my guests.
Sure.
Where I just ask you quick questions, you give me a quick answer, because these are things that maybe people have wondered over the years, and I can ask you quick questions. All set?
Sure. Go.
Time now to play 5 fast facts with Alexander Daigle. The best teammate you ever played with, and why?
Paul Coffey. Wow. I love that guy. I think he opened my eyes to a lot of things. He always had my back, and he's so funny and dry humor. I loved it.
All right. The best coach you ever played for, and why?
Jacques Lemaire told me exactly what I had to do, and I had my best season.
Who did you hate playing against the most, and why?
Eric Lindros. Because I was so happy when I got traded there. Because I don't know if you look at clips, you see Eric when you get the first face up, he's going to cross check you in the chest just to start the game, warm you up a little bit, and after that on the ice, he was a force for 6-7 years. He was just dominating physically, and he was scoring as well. He was an offensive threat, big time. So this guy, Eric, I didn't like him.
Yeah. Favorite NHL city to play in and why?
Favorite NHL city to play in?
Play in.
I would say there's two. Of course, New York is New York, and when you're 25, I had a great time in New York. But if I had to say, I like Minnesota. I think Minnesota has got the grit of Canadian city as far as I think they had a streak of sellout. It was always sellout. People are really into it there, and the university, and to live the lifestyle is amazing for families. So Minnesota for me, on the team that I played for.
Perfect. If you hadn't become an NHL player, what career do you think you would have had instead?
I always say, I would like stand-up comic. Like I would like to, if I had the right, I always like, making people laugh. The only thing that I would say is I will need a lot of practice talking in public because, that's a skill and having good writers around me. Because now, I work for a production company. So the writers are key.
Perfect. Alexander, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for doing. I'm so glad things are going so well for you, my friend.
Thank you. And you look great, by the way. You look, I was surprised because, when you told me you're on the podcast.
What does that mean you were surprised?
Well, no, if somebody goes on a podcast, usually there's no TV, right? So they have a TV, radio face, but not you're like, wow, you don't change. I love it.
You're a good man, Alexander. You're full of crap, but you're a good man.
Thanks for the platform. I love it, man. All right. Good luck.
Good luck with the documentary. I appreciate it. Our guest has been Alexander Daigle, former NHLer and now potentially a stand-up comic down the road. Who knows? The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by 7-Eleven and Athlete's Care. Before leaving the rink, order your favorite Slurpee, fresh 100% premium Arabica coffee, hot from the oven pizza and wings, pint of ice cream, or even a carton of milk, a dozen eggs, and a loaf of bread from the 7 Now app. And Team 7-Eleven will have your order ready for pickup 24/7. Athlete's Care is proud to be celebrating its 25th year, offering sports medicine services to both elite athletes and the general population who require rehab for a new or chronic pain or injury. Go to where the best go. Athlete's Care Sports Medicine Clinics with 24 locations in the Greater Toronto Area and in Ottawa. Hey, if you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca, where you can both listen and subscribe to future shows. 7-Eleven's Overtime Podcast can be found on the Spotify, iTunes podcast apps, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. As well, please check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel at O-Time Podcast. Until next week, I'm Gino Retta saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast.